Welcome back to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Maul.
And I'm Dutch.
And this week we're going to go over the NFL review. It's Monday night. We haven't gotten the Monday night game yet, but we're still going to review what happened on Sunday. And
I mean, we know Kirk Cousins isn't going to do well in primetime, so.
Yeah, it's an upside-down year for him. But just to get started, as we do every week, we're going to play Guess the Player. It's my turn to give the clues and Dutch to pick. So your choice, past or present.
Let's go past first.
All right, past. That's a good one. I hope I stump you here. All right, so college, Texas A&M.
Okay.
He played for the Chiefs and then the Rams.
I think I know who this is. Is it Dante Hall?
Dang it!
The
yes.
X Factor?
Yes, dude. That's good pull. Good pull.
The X Factor. Dude, I mean, the only reason I know that is because I had looked it up because I saw that the Chiefs are putting him in the Ring of Honor.
Yes, and that's why I picked him, because I did the same thing. That was going to be one of my clues if he just got put into the Ring of Honor.
Oh, that dude, I still remember that juke that he did against Denver.
The human joystick, dude.
He was unreal.
Was so fun to watch. What do you remember? He went on that streak. I don't remember if it was like 7 straight or something like that, but he had like a return in like 7 straight games or something like that. It was, and the Chiefs weren't even really.
They were terrible.
Yeah, they weren't even that good.
Chiefs were awful. That was like back when like Trent Green. I still remember Trent Green. That was like a hit I'll never forget. He like slid against the Bengals, and I think that even the announcers were like, "Hey, I think Trent Green's dead." I don't know if this guy's gonna get up. Ugh, but no, the human joystick. As soon as you said Texas A&M, I was like, if he says Chiefs, I think I know this.
Dang, dude, that's a good pull. All right. And then so present, in honor of National Tight Ends Day, Mark Andrews.
I'm gonna take a guess. I think this is the right answer. Was it Maryland?
No.
I really.
Tell me if you want some clues. And I'll say not a typical tight end school. So if you're thinking like Iowa or Cincinnati or anything like that, like not one of them.
All right, I'll take
Power 5.
Okay. Is it ACC?
No.
Okay.
I'll say they are switching.
Oh, no, it's Oklahoma.
It is Oklahoma. Yep, there you go.
Because I think he was around with Peterson during the – I have to look it up, but I think he was there for the Boise State.
Oh, the
greatest game ever played.
Yeah, with Adrian Peterson and
I forget who it was some no-name quarterback.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, dude.
Gosh.
Yeah. Probably
the lateral.
The Statue of Liberty, the
Oh,
lateral, like that whole I could watch that game on repeat. It was fantastic.
I still, anytime you hear Zabransky's legs are going to be critical here, and it immediately takes me back. I don't know if we said this on the podcast. It's a good story. I remember Zabransky throws the pick towards the end of the fourth quarter. Oklahoma goes in. Me and my dad were pulling for Boise, and I was like, well, the game's over. So I was like, I'm going to go to bed. And so the bedroom upstairs, we had these like wood stairs that walked up. So I was like laying in bed, and all of a sudden I just hear this. My dad like flings open the door. He's like, Boise State just scored on a hook of lateral, and both of us like flew down the stairs, ran up the stairs. Like you see the overtime, like because I think another play that gets like missed in that, like you have those two that you just named, was when they did the toss to the halfback and he throws it to the tight end on fourth down. Like
there was so many plays in that like last 2 minutes that were just fantastic. I was in California at the time, so I mean it's funny because you said you were going to bed. I thought I remember it being like lunchtime when I watched that game, but
dude, I still remember living in California for a little bit and waking up one morning. It was like 7:00 in the morning. I turned on the TV and game day had already been on for an hour. And I was like, what is this? I was like, I get to watch all the games. Speaking of that, like at least I know this is the NFL episode. Hopefully college gets on the same page as the NFL.
Yeah.
Like you never have a 10 p.m. kickoff on a Monday night, even though the game's in San Diego.
Yeah.
It's like college has got to get to that, or else I'm not going to stay up to watch it. But the NFL's got it figured out, unless it's about being a referee, and then both NFL and college are still out.
Yeah.
But
So to kind of just start off this episode, let's talk about, we're about halfway through now. We made some predictions at the beginning of the year and just kind of recap what our biggest regrets are or things that we think we got right that we're kind of proud of. I'll let you go first. Anything that you can think of?
Oh, I mean, the biggest regret is predicting the Jets to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So right on. Yeah. With that, I think I had the Bengals going to the Super Bowl. So I mean, we jinxed those teams.
At least
out the get-go.
Your team still has a chance. Mine ended on the fourth play of the season. Like, I still remember Peyton grabbing his head, being like, "Oh no!" And I was sitting there like, "Oh no!" This is the first year of the podcast that I picked the Jets. What a moron!
Yeah.
I even had people tell me, like, "Hey, I've been a Jets fan for 40 years. Don't do it." Like, so, I mean, that was a big miss, but at the same time, like, we both have some good picks. Like, the one that I look at I remember you being like, "I don't see that happening." Right now, the Titans are in last in the AFC South.
Yeah, that was a good pick by you.
And the Texans look good. I think we both thought that the Jaguars would be there. I don't think that anyone really thought the Texans were going to show out.
No, CJ Stroud is playing out of his mind. So you can tell that there's talent there, and you hope that they just build around him. Like, obviously, this isn't going to be their season, but like, he is a good, starting point that you can start getting people around him. He's getting good rhythm with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Like, there's pieces there that they can start now working their drafts around that in order to help them kind of produce in that division. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, the Jags are their kind of the clear favorite, but like, by no means are they untouchable in that division.
No.
Like, in the next few years, it could easily flip-flop. Because, I mean, the Jags have done that plenty of times already throughout their history, where one year they look amazing and then they're the bottom the next year. So
we're going to save this for when we get to the Jacksonville, but earlier yesterday, you said something that I was like, we're going to talk about this more in depth.
We'll talk about it.
Maul sitting there and he goes, "You know what? Trevor Lawrence is just mid."
He is.
Now we'll get into what that means. A little teaser, keep you watching for most of the episode. But I'm not going to disagree with your logic on the argument.
Primarily, it's coming from a Calvin Ridley owner. You know what I mean? Like, I've got Calvin Ridley on my fantasy team, right? So when you're wondering, like, why is he not producing? It's that, and it's not a shot at Trevor Lawrence. I'm not saying that he's not good. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it here in a little bit.
What about you? What's your biggest regret?
So yeah, the Bengals obviously is a terrible pick. I don't think that they are. They're in last place. Like, they're not going to the Super Bowl. It's just not happening, right? But on the Calvin Ridley subject, my fantasy dark horse picks, dude, if you go back and look at them, I'm pretty sure I said Derek Carr as my QB.
Oh.
And I mean, like, again, it's a dark horse, right? So, like, you're not expecting, but like, whiff, dude.
Left it in the oven a little too long.
Yeah.
Like.
And then an actual whiff, one of my receivers was Kadarius Toney.
Oh, brick for hands.
Yeah, feet for hands, dude. I mean, even if he had feet, he could at least, touch the ball. My man is just scoring points for the other team.
I think we both, fantasy's so difficult to produce, like a true dark horse. Like, I mean, Puka Nacua is probably the headliner from wide receivers.
Yep.
And you sort of sit back and you look at him, you're like, no one's drafting him. Like, that's, if you went out and bought the draft kit, like, his name's not even on a sticker.
Sure.
Like, it's not there. So, yeah, if you knew that he was coming out, then you're a savant and you need to go to Vegas. But outside of that, like, from wide receiver position, you sort of look at this year, there's not a whole lot of, like, there's guys that have been surprising, like Christian Kirk has clearly found a relationship with Trevor Lawrence. It comes at the detriment of Ridley. But if you're a Christian Kirk owner, you're like, dude, keep throwing it to Kirk. But Ridley, you just sort of, there's too many guys on that team. Now, you sort of talked about, Calvin Ridley, that my man will sit there and run around. He'll do a 10-yard dig, and when he turns around, if the ball's not there, Ridley's done with the route.
Plays off.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, week one, we look like a genius, right? Like I picked him, I drafted him. I'm thinking like, dude, this is it. Like Calvin Ridley's about to have that same year he had with the Falcons, and then I mean he's essentially just not produced for the rest of the year.
And I mean, from the tight end, I said Dalton Schultz, and he really hasn't done a whole lot with the Texans, mainly due to yet again Tank Dell.
Well, the
looks
tight end
amazing.
position is I mean it's tough. Like
It's feast or famine.
yeah, and I mean really it's like Travis Kelce. And then everybody else. And then in that everybody else, there's like maybe 3 guys that kind of are consistent. You know, your Mark Andrews. George Kittle's even been up and down this year. But, I mean, other than that, like...
Unless he's playing the Cowboys. Then Kittle's on top of the world. But,
Like,
I mean, we did call the Sam Laporta.
Sam Laporta's been great, but even then, like, it's a very finicky, it's up and down from a fantasy standpoint. You know what I mean? So, that's a tough position.
I mean, the other division that I sort of sit back and it was a big swing and a miss on my part was calling the Panthers number 2 in the NFC South.
I think I had them there as well.
I really thought that they would, in a division that was hurting so bad. I didn't see Baker playing as well as he has. Baker looks, what's funny, I literally told you yesterday as we were watching the game, I was like, dude, Baker looks good. Very next play, throws a pick. And you're just like, God, Baker.
Yeah.
But the Falcons are...
I don't know. I mean, I know how they're in first because that division is atrocious, but at the same time, like, I'm not giving any credit to Desmond Ridder here. Like, somehow they're winning games, so, like, I guess, you know, good on the team, but, like...
That dude was responsible for, like, 4 turnovers yesterday in the red zone, like, throwing picks, fumbles, like...
They're a better team than we were giving them credit for sure.
Now, talk about a fantasy dark horse that really came out of that team, and it's... I know that fantasy owners are just screaming right now if you own Bijan.
Tyler Algier.
God.
Which, like, I mean, it's not surprising because of how good he was last year, right? He was good last year, and he's filling that exact same role. It was just they put so much stock into Bijan, and everybody was so hyped on Bijan.
Well, you took him so high in the draft.
Yeah, you just expect Tyler Algier to kind of go by the wayside, but he's, if anything, I mean, Bijan is, you know, the Jahmyr Gibbs on the Lions. Like, it's just... which is weird to me, right? Like the way the running back position has gone, they know like we've only got a few years of this dude on his rookie contract to like get everything out of him as we possibly can. But now all of a sudden it seems like these owners are like saving their running backs that they drafted, and you're like, well, which one is it? You know what I mean? Like you pick this guy to be the guy, and now you're gonna like put him on pitch counts and like use the other guys around him. And I mean, I don't know. Like I can't say that it's silly, but it just seems when you're trying to play fantasy, right, and you're trying to like get these guys, like it's not what they've done in the past, and it's making it difficult to, you know, produce.
Fantasy. We were talking about this yesterday because you had I'm gonna bring up something you're gonna get angry about. Is so you're trailing right now by like 15 points in fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's because, you know, yesterday you look before you're coming up here and you're like, oh, Kareem Hunt's projected to get 0 points because we don't know if he's going to play. Well, then sure enough, Kareem Hunt not just isn't questionable, he actually plays the whole game.
Scores 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. He would have got you enough to win, but you're sitting there and we were sort of talking about it. It's like the fantasy like, how NFL guys manage their rosters in the sake of fantasy does need to change. Like from a
transparency thing when they're talking about injuries and like however that is getting, you know, down the wickets of like, this is our, you know, list of guys that are truly, you know, day to day or like game time decisions versus like, because again, at the beginning of the week, you know, Kareem Hunt was questionable the whole week, right? It was like he had a thigh injury and it's like, okay, you kind of know that, but he was projected for like 12.5 points the whole week. Yeah. So he was in my lineup. Now I'm not proud of it. I had an Armageddon of bad breaks as, you know, guys being on buys and injuries and stuff like that. So I had Kareem Hunt in my lineup, which, you know, I was just hoping to get like 10 points out of him. That would have been great for me. But then I checked, again, I was about to go on a flight, so I wasn't going to have internet while the game started. So I checked, and all of a sudden they dropped his projections to 0. Usually when that happens, whoever did that, like, knows something, or like they've talked to somebody, and it's like, he's probably not going to play. Like, even if he was like a game time decision, they usually will have him with some points if he could play. Yeah. But when they drop those projections to 0, you're like, all right, can't risk taking a 0. So I threw Elijah Mitchell in my lineup because he was the only one that hadn't started a game yet, which, you know, Who knows? Like, I don't know about Christian McCaffrey because, again, Kyle Shanahan will never give you an honest answer when it comes to injuries. But, again, I take Kareem out of the lineup, and then by the time I land and open up my phone, he's got 2 touchdowns, and, that would have been the difference right now of winning that game.
It's tough. I mean, I guess we can transition immediately into sort of the division-by-division breakdown of this past week and sort of where teams stand. I look at the Browns. They came away with a win, but their defense, I just don't understand it. It's like you have a drive where Myles Garrett's unreal. They're getting fumbles, they're getting interceptions, and then Indy drives it right down the field. Now, the
inconsistency this year, I feel like it's actually been like maybe the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, since COVID, I think. But the inconsistency on a week in, week out, I feel like has never, maybe just hasn't paid attention to it as much, but I've never seen it so far in one way or the other. How do you go out and beat the 49ers and look like you are a Super Bowl caliber team and then struggle with not only just the Colts, who aren't that good of a team, but the backup quarterback of the Colts, which Minshew mania and all that stuff, fine, but if you're going to shut down the 49ers, you shouldn't have any problem with Gardner Minshew.
Correct. And now the only thing I could say, it seems to be this, we're going to sort of get into this with some other teams. Yesterday was a good example of how I think that we talked about it, where you pay some guys so much money to be your stars, and it's Watson was clear to go back in the game. Doesn't go back in the game, whether it was his decision, coach's decision, who knows. But P.J. Walker won him the game. And look good. And P.J. Walker beat the 49ers. You sort of sit back and you're like, dude, you got a dude that you're paying $250 million to, guaranteed, sitting on the sideline.
Yeah, keeping toasty with his hot chocolate,
And the backups were it. And then you got Tyrod Taylor.
Daniel Jones, and that meme I sent you is someone's about to get fired when Tyrod Taylor's beating the Bills. Now, they end up losing that game, but still, it's why would you pay? And this goes back to that conversation we had kind of at the beginning of the year of paying quarterbacks and that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that when you find that guy, don't pay him. But just because your only guy available at that time is Daniel Jones does not mean you have to pay him that money, because you could easily just find someone like Tyrod Taylor to fill in until you find that guy.
And the Browns did the same thing with Watson. I'm not saying that Watson's done right now, but from the standpoint of when Watson came to the Browns, Watson hadn't played a down of football in over a year.
Yeah.
And it's you hadn't seen a guy, and it shows he doesn't. Now, I sort of look back at it and I'm he had D-Hop in his prime. There has to be something to that it's as magical as he looked. You sort of wonder, it's was it just because you just had this amazing wide receiver in his prime that was catching everything that you threw up, and people they didn't really look at it saying, oh, maybe you weren't as accurate as we thought you were. You just sort of had a really good wide receiver. He's got good talent with Amari Cooper. He doesn't, Amari's no D-Hop in his prime. He's still a great wide receiver for what he does. But in terms of where the Browns are, you look at them in the division, they're 4-2. They're tied for second with the Steelers. The Ravens yesterday really, I think it'd be hard to say that the Ravens didn't shock people with how well they manhandled the Lions throughout that game. But
I think that was a combination of the Lions just didn't show up because, and again, I go back to the inconsistency of we saw the Lions beat the Chiefs. We've seen the Lions. I think the power rankings came out last week, and people talking about the Lions being number one. And I wouldn't have gone that far, but don't get me wrong, the Ravens haven't looked anything super special this year. And then to go out and absolutely just, like you said, manhandle just shows the inconsistency this year in the NFL is really tough.
I can't remember if they said it on ESPN this morning. It was either 21 or 28 points the Ravens had scored
before the Lions even got a first down or something like that. Yeah. That's just pure domination. And again, the combination of one team is just, it's not their day.
100%. And this sort of goes back to the fantasy. We both thought that Jahmyr Gibbs would have a better game. It's starting to show that, yes, they need Montgomery. You need a back that clearly Montgomery's experience helps him.
Yeah,
in the running game.
Someone who's going to dominate the touches, and then you have a change of pace, lightning type of back.
I think Gibbs needs a little bit. They need to treat him more like Bijan, putting him out in the slot, just sort of changing him up, but keeping Montgomery on the same position
At the same time, yeah.
But I had the Lions winning the game. Even if you had said, "Hey, the Lions lose," if you had told me it'd been 35-7, I'd been like,
Yeah,
"No way."
it's gonna be a Justin Tucker last second field goal maybe to win, but like
I just didn't see that at Dan Campbell's guys. But I mean, bravo to the Ravens. They looked really good. The Steelers shocked me. I did not see them going to L.A. beating the Rams, but they played well enough to win.
Again, though, like the Steelers, I always thought that they were a better team than people were kind of giving them credit for, but they've shown some games where you're just like, ooh, man, the Steelers are bad. Like, they're not as good as you thought they were. But here they are, 4-2, second in the division.
And as you said, it's sort of the whole NFL this year. There's not a team like, I mean, it was clear last year that the Eagles, in my opinion, were the best team in all of football, right there with the 49ers and the Chiefs. And throughout this whole year, at no point would you be like, one of these franchises is dominant. And even to last night, you sit back and you're like, well, Miami's really good. And you're like, well, are they really? Because
they're beatable on any given week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they score 70 points against the Broncos, but then lay an egg against two better teams.
The Bills and the Eagles, they both just didn't show up.
Now, I will give the Dolphins a little bit. It's funny. We have our buddy in common. He sent me a text last night. Was that if the Dolphins win this convincingly, they're going to win the Super Bowl, and they didn't. So now I'm like, well, back to reality.
Yeah.
I remember we always told him, don't get your hopes too high for this. Like you could always tell. I think Dolphins fans are all the same. They're just like, this is our year.
Where it's more just like, I'm ready to be hurt again.
Oh my gosh. And he literally sent me a text this morning. I can't repeat it, but he was just like, I hate everything. So I just sit back, and the thing about the Dolphins game last night that I was sort of surprised about is Tyreek Hill, if he catches that ball that doesn't and runs into the end zone, like it's just, there's simple plays that the Dolphins could have made that sort of catapult them into it just being more of a game. Not saying they would have won, but I don't think the game gets away from them there at the end as it did.
I mean, it got away at the end. That's one of those where you look at the box score and it doesn't quite give you what was going on in that game. Because like there was a couple times where like when Hurts fumbled that ball and the Dolphins got it, I think they were tied at the time. And you're thinking like, this is it. Like this is that momentum swing that's going to swing the Dolphins and win this game. And then sure enough, just right back to it. You know, he drops that ball. All of a sudden the Eagles go down and drive, and then it's like, okay, you know, the Eagles ended up winning. But like, you're right. Like it was a good game. It was a good game than what the box score showed at the end. But you know, I don't know. It's good. Two good teams. You like to see good football. You know, the Dolphins are still in first place, so
it was a great game.
Yeah.
Now, before we leave the AFC North, I do want to ask, do you think the Bengals have a chance to win the division? And if you do think, like, is it a good chance, slim chance? Like, this is like 1,001 odds?
Again, because of the inconsistency, yes. Like, they have a chance to win the division because they're not, I mean, what are they, 3 games back maybe? 2 games back? It's
back.
Not that insurmountable. I give it a lower chance just because of how poor they've looked so far. Like, I think they've had one game where they truly were like, that's the Bengals team I thought was going to show up every single year. And it was only one game. And every other game, it's like, wow, the Bengals look bad. Like, Joe Mixon, another, like, he's in an opportunity to be like an absolute standout star, right? Like, he has the ability and now the situation to like be that guy, and it's just there's just nothing there.
And it's not just from a fantasy perspective; it's also just from like a pure numbers perspective.
It's just like an inefficient all-around team. Like they're just not doing anything well.
I like the Bengals, but the reason I'm low on them is because they have to get through the Browns and the Ravens to win the division, and they like both games this year they've gotten shellacked by both of those teams, and Burrow doesn't have a good history against the Browns, and the Ravens, that division's always been tough.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care who they could go play the Steelers next week and look bad against the Steelers just because it's like those teams truly do hate one another and they play one another pretty well.
Yeah, and it's those division games that are always really tough.
Dude, 100%. We were talking about that last night. It's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like, prime example, the Eagles next week play the Commanders, and it's like, the Commanders, as bad as they are, when they play the Eagles, somehow both of these teams, you're like, are the Eagles not good? What happened?
They beat them last year.
I know.
And then they almost already beat them this year. I mean, that was a really close game.
And you just sort of sit back and look at that. I mean, we'll go right to the NFC East since we're talking about the Commanders. I mean, the Commanders lose to the Giants yesterday. I felt bad because, yes, he played for Alabama. Jonathan Allen, like, you can just tell he's super frustrated.
Oh, he's furious.
Furious.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to come from a program that you're literally winning back-to-back national championships to go into an organization that's like, we can't even figure out how to score more than 7 points in a week.
We talked about it, right? Like, on paper, I mean, this is what he's feeling, right? When he's like, on paper, like, they've got this defense that's like, let's do this. Now, again, they held the Giants to, not that many points. It was 14-7, right? So
yeah.
if you go into a game and you're like, you're only going to let the other team score 2 touchdowns, you're probably feeling pretty confident. Like, yeah, our defense did the job and we might win this game. But like, you could tell he's got that same frustration where we're like, on paper, that defense should be way better, especially against a backup. Not saying Tyrod Taylor's bad, but there's a reason he's backup. And a struggling Giants team. That's You feel for his frustration.
Something we both did miss on that you brought up yesterday, and I'll be willing to say I'm wrong on it. Sam Howell doesn't look bad.
No, he surprised me with, I want to say how good he looks, but like how not bad he looks. Like, I thought it was just going to be just an absolute dumpster fire all year for him.
Well, the end of the game showed it up. Like, he literally somehow manages to get away. Yeah. He's running.
Stiff arms a guy, runs out, and you're like, that's some Patrick Mahomes type play. Wide open. Was it Dotson? Dotson? Yeah, dude.
Right in the hands.
Yeah.
Drop.
Brick.
And you sit back and you just like, you could tell in Sam Howell's face, it's like, yo, man, I just stiff-armed this defensive end.
What else am I supposed to do? Like, that was the game winner right there, or at least tie the game.
And you sit back and you look at the Giants and the Commanders, and neither team, the Giants have looked better with Tyrod Taylor. I'm not sure if it's Tyrod, if it's the offensive line starting to come together. If Daniel Jones comes back and they look terrible, I'd be the first one to tell you, throw back Tyrod.
Well,
it's just,
I think that this division isn't like, it's exactly how we called it. Like, Eagles are clearly dominant. Cowboys aren't great, but like, they're better than the other two, and they're going to win enough games to be a clear, easy second place. And then the other two are just kind of throwaways. Like, it's exactly what the division is.
I'm still amazed with, I feel like the Eagles are getting better each week because they've stopped using multiple backs. Like, they've been like, hey, Swift's our guy. They use Gainwell sort of like the Lions are using Gibbs, just sort of subbing him in on specific packages. I really like Swift. Like, Swift runs the ball hard. I think it was like the week 2 or week 3 that Swift got a bunch of carries, and I think everyone at that moment was like, that's our back.
Well, again, we kind of alluded to it with like the injuries and stuff, but it's also like depth charts. Remember, at the beginning of the year, the Eagles had all 4 running backs.
Listed as number 1.
All 4 running backs listed as the number 1 on their depth chart. One, just the idea of that is stupid. Like, you can't have all 4 guys as your number 1. Like, and then the frustration is like, you clearly knew that Boston Scott and I don't even remember who the other one, Rashad Penny, I think is maybe the third. Like, you clearly knew those 2 guys weren't in the mix, right? Like, let's be honest. You healthy scratched Rashad Penny week 1. If you're going to healthy scratch a dude, you knew damn well he wasn't number 1 on the depth chart, right? So they start Kenneth Gainwell week 1. And again, as a DeAndre Swift owner at the beginning of the year, I'm thinking like, well, there goes a pick because I thought it was DeAndre Swift, and I picked him high in the draft.
Yep.
And then Kenneth Gainwell's the leader, and you're like, well, there goes that. Now, Gainwell kind of like hurt his ribs or something week 1, so then they swapped to Swift. But then Swift goes off, and you're like, okay, like, you spent all camp with these guys. That was clearly, like, how did nobody else see that? We all knew that was going to happen, but, like, why would you do this, like, magic dance of, like, smoke and mirrors of, like, oh, we got all 4 guys. I don't know if Boston Scott's ever even seen the field all year, so it's just like.
On some kick returns and stuff, but outside of that.
How was he number 1 on your depth chart?
The Eagles frustrate me because they are such a good team, but I feel the best, I've said it the past few weeks, that their offensive coordinator, it's just not. Last night you see exactly what the Eagles were successful at last year, which was just get the ball up to A.J. Brown. Like, It was so funny last night. He caught it, and I'm like, and there's who the Titans traded away. Just
Traylon Burks.
And we looked it up last night. Traylon Burks through 6 games has had 99 yards,
99 yards.
99 yards, 6 catches, and one of those catches was for 70 yards. Because when I asked Maul, I was like, how many yards do you think he got? He's like, maybe like 26 or something. And sure enough, if you took away that 70-yard catch, it's 29 yards, like on 5 catches. And A.J. Brown last night had 137 yards catch. And you just like, we can, dog on the Titans later, but it's like from the Eagles' perspective, like I do really like the Julio Jones pickup. I don't think he's nearly what he was at any point in his career. He adds, I think, some leadership to the team, just adds another wide receiver that he made a catch last night. It's like they have the ability to get guys on the field. It's just about not getting cute. That's what I found with the Eagles. Like I liked it that I love the tush push or the brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. Like I love the fact that on 4th and 1, they don't question it. It's like we're going and we're getting this. And
yeah, and then the other team knows they're going for it and they're getting it. Yeah. 93% success rate right now.
Which is funny because teams are so mad about it. And I think what Jalen said last night is the truth. Teams are mad about it because they just can't execute it like the Eagles do. Like it's not that the Eagles are like cheating the teams. They're just better at doing it.
Sirianni said in the press conference, like if anybody can do it, then everyone should do it. But they just can't. Like I think the Eagles had 41 of those that they've done this year, and the next closest as far as success rate is like the Bills at like 11. It seems like it's cheating because the one team is able to do it so well. If it was that easy, everyone should do it, and they can't, so they don't, and therefore they're mad about it.
Which Tua brought it up in the press conference because both him and Jalen played at Alabama. They were like, how do you think they're so successful? And he's like, have you never seen Jalen in a weight room?
Yeah.
Like he's like
squats 600 pounds.
Yeah, he's squatting with the offensive lineman. Like he's incredibly strong. But the Eagles are looking great. We'll see. We'll transition immediately to the other team in the NFC that's right there with them with the 49ers. They play tonight against Minnie. It's a real question mark. I think we'll learn a lot about San Francisco tonight if McCaffrey. They already said Debo's out, but if McCaffrey doesn't play, Trent Williams doesn't play, it's either going to add more fire or more wood to the fire, and like Purdy isn't as good without this talent around him. Or, in my opinion, what will happen is Kyle Shanahan will distribute the ball to other playmakers they have.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
When injuries happen in the middle of a game, it's hard to just be like, hey, you who hasn't practiced all week, go in here.
Well, then again, it's one thing to be against like the Browns defense. We got Myles Garrett coming at you versus the Vikings defense, who have for the last 2 years hasn't been able to stop anybody. So they'll be all right tonight.
Or just Kirk Cousins in primetime. It's like that if I have to bet on how this is going to go, it's not in the Vikings' favor.
Yeah.
But the rest of the division, I think that both of us, yes, they're not numerically the worst team in all of football. The Panthers are. The Cardinals still aren't a good football team, but they're way more competitive.
They've surprised me with how well they have played. Like I thought it was just going to be an absolute dumpster fire. They weren't going to score any points all year. And they have surprised me with how well they have played. I mean, they beat the Cowboys, and we all like to hate on the Cowboys and all that, and it's fun. But at the end of the day, you still showed up against a professional team who's gonna make the playoffs, and you beat them. So you do got to give props to the Cardinals and Josh Dobbs because they've shown up and they're making it competitive at least every week.
The other team in the division we talk about just sort of like the mid-level of play, it's Seattle. For as good as they looked last year, and then you add Smith and Jigba.
I think it's just all Geno Smith's play. I mean, the team is the exact same as they were. Geno is just not this. I don't know what was into Geno last year. He looked amazing. And I think it was just one of those off-the-cuff kind of years. He's come back to reality of the true Geno Smith type of play, which isn't bad.
I think it's just film. They have film on him and the Seattle offense.
Maybe. He's just playing like an average Geno Smith, which is why the Seahawks are just an average Seahawks team now.
I haven't watched enough to know whether they're loading the box or Walker's had not as good. He still had a good year in comparison to other running backs, but he hasn't had the level of dominance. It makes me wonder if like the offensive line just isn't there. But I will agree when you look at just the production of the wide receivers, especially Smith and Jigba, like I just don't. That's the one guy that I don't understand, like how good they played last year. And I'm more siding with you with the credence of like it's starting to become more and more of a Geno Smith issue. It's like you have too many weapons on this offensive side of the football, and you're not Joe Burrow getting hit, after taking a snap within 2 seconds. Like you just sort of look at him and you're like, this team should be way better. It's most likely fallen, as you said, right on Geno. So you sit back and look at them. Then you get the Rams. The Rams, as I said, I was shocked to see them lose to the Steelers yesterday, mainly just because they did some things that you just didn't see. Like,
well, I mean, it's the inconsistency. Like the inconsistencies and the things. Cooper Kupp, 2, just flat out drops. I mean, like, give me the under on that at any given week. On the plus 4,000 odds of having Cooper Kupp having 2 drops in a game. Just it doesn't happen. I mean, and again, it's just the inconsistency. So it's like the Rams have looked really good this season. I mean, like really good. Stafford's playing well. Kyron Williams being out hurts, right? Because he's been their star out of the backfield. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp have both been great. Cooper's only played I think 2 weeks, but he right back into just being an all-star. Puka keeping his level of production up, right? Everybody thought like the instant Cooper Kupp came back, he was going to be an afterthought. And he is still just producing. It's again inconsistency is all I can talk about, and how they lose to the Steelers.
It's so frustrating because you just, as you said, you see a team that has so much potential. I still think they're a playoff team. Like I know they're sitting there at 3-4. When you look at the rest of the NFC, you're just sort of like, I think they have a good chance just because. It's funny that we talk about the individual rival playing one another. Anytime that they play, it's just like yesterday, Seattle's playing the Cardinals. It's like these teams have a feel for one another.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about why I feel like when you have coaches that have been around other coaches long enough, they sort of start picking up just like, I really think this guy's going to call this play.
Gut feelings.
Yep.
Like, hey, it's this type of situation. That defense coordinator loves to all-out blitz. I'm going to call a screen. And then it looks like a brilliant play.
Yeah. It's just...
I agree with you. I mean, the Rams easily are still a playoff team. I mean, you look at it, like Eagles, Cowboys, probably only the Lions coming out of the North, probably only one team coming out of the South, whichever that team is, the Bucks or the Falcons, maybe even the Saints have a still possibility. And then you got the West, which is clearly the Niners, and then call it Seahawks and Rams, or even Rams and Seahawks. I mean, there's your teams right there. Like, that's an easily doable thing for the Rams still.
Yeah, 100%. Now, a little bit of a transition of a team that has 3 teams that could get into the playoffs to a team that a division I'm like, man, I don't know who in the world's a playoff team, the AFC East. Like, you've got the Dolphins get a huge favor done for them by the Patriots yesterday, beating the Bills. But at the same time, I literally texted my buddy.
The Bills lose to the Patriots.
I know. Well, I texted my buddy when the Bills got beat by Jacksonville. I was like, hey, man, I'm sorry. And he goes, this is literally my life. This is why every single Sunday I'm just clinically depressed because I have to watch this team play every single week. And he said something that I was like, that's probably the truest thing I've ever heard about the Bills, especially with Josh Allen. They play to the level of competition that they play against. Like when they go out and face the Dolphins, they look great. They go out and then play the Jags, they look terrible. And you're just like, this is a team that it's like, I don't know what it is. It's
inconsistency.
Dude,
that was the word on the toilet paper this morning.
I mean, think about it. They've lost to Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Trevor Lawrence. Like you just sort of sit back and look at those and you're like, all 3 of those should have been wins. The Bills should be sitting at 7-0. I still think they're a playoff team because the AFC is sort of a mess outside of,
Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Kansas City, we'll go into the AFC West next, but like out of the AFC East, like as much as I'd love to tell you that the pipe dream's alive, that the Jets could get into the playoffs, I just doubt it because the defense can't win every game.
You put Donna Kelsey in the stands, dude. The Jets are a playoff team.
Yeah. Whoever the opposing quarterback or star player's mom, if they can just be in the stands, and Zach Wilson's going to have
He's
a great
showing
game.
out, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Dolphins, like, it's one of those ones that last night, it's like, here's your chance to, like, show you're a good football team, or not just a good football team, but show you are a contender.
You can beat high-level competition.
And you just
can't.
They can't. And there were some drops. There was just plays throughout the game, like, talked about the inconsistencies of teams performing that it's so frustrating to watch because you look at Tua, and, like, I give Tua props. Like, I know that people were making fun of him for doing the judo lessons or whatever. My man knows how to fall now without somehow just rattling his brain. Like, he's been able to take shots, and at no point have you been like, ooh, Tua's not getting up this year. And they have stars. Like, Hill's unreal.
Yeah. Their offense is stacked.
Yeah, he's so good. Like,
when Achane comes back, dude.
And that will probably be a big lift for them. Like,
Mostert's great. Don't get me wrong. Mostert's great. But
Achane has different gear.
Yeah, it's a different level of speed there.
In him, yes, 100. I didn't even think about that one last night. That if he had been playing and healthy in that game, is the game possibly a different outcome? 100%. Like, he just adds a lot to that offense. Talk about it. That would have been a true dark horse for fantasy too, because he is really good. Like, he has that second gear that you look for, or even sixth gear, with how fast he's running. But I mean, the Jets and the Patriots, like, I know a lot of people have been calling for Belichick's head. It came out that I guess during the offseason they had signed a multi-year extension with Belichick, so Belichick's not going anywhere. But the Patriots are terrible.
Yeah, they're bad.
The fact that they won yesterday, I like just sit back. It's like the Bills did what they needed to. They drive it down, score. Now it's sort of showing their injuries. Like, they lose White, they lose Milano. Like, they lost a lot of defensive guys, and you just sort of sit back. And for the Bills, I think their only option right now is the trade deadline's next week. Like, they got to go make some moves. Like,
on the defensive side of the ball?
Yes, 100%. Like, I'd also argue, like, I know this is sort of going to sound nuts. Like, even if it goes in division and, like, going to get Dalvin Cook, like, I just don't like the Bills running backs. Like,
they're going to get rid of James Cook to replace him with Dalvin Cook?
Yeah. Oh. Ultimate brotherly hate. Like, I just sort of sit back and look at the Bills, and it's like, outside from the last time they had a good running back was Marshawn Lynch. Like,
Shady McCoy.
Shady was on the back end of his career. That was the only thing I should say about Shady at that point. Like, was Shady still good? Yes, but was he the Shady at the Eagles?
No. Oh, no.
Like, it was just, they need a running back. And they really need, I said it last week of Hunter Renfrow, they need an inside slot receiver. Like, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs are your deep threats, but they do not have a guy over the middle. Now, you brought it up. They do have a guy. They just don't use him.
Yes.
In Dalton Kincaid.
Yes, they could use Dalton Kincaid in that. Because, like, he's not, like, just a big lumbering tight end. Like, he can be an agile, but big body, like Brock Bowers kind of body. Like, that's the kind of level he brings. And he's shown, like, when you give him the ball, he can be good with it. Like, they could use him keep Dawson Knox on the field if you want. Like, you can run him as a tight end. Just switch Dalton Kincaid to a slot receiver. Like, you don't even have to go get somebody else to go pay him. You could use Dalton Kincaid in that exact capacity.
100%. I just, the other thing my buddy always sends me a text about, which is so true. I don't know what it is with Josh Allen. He'll eventually get to the point where he stops this. It'll be like 3rd and 5. It's like, how are we going to get this? I'm going to run through everybody. It's like, dude, you don't have to. Just, like, dump it down and let these guys get some yards. And it's so frustrating watching them in the whole division. It's just sort of, I think it's between the Dolphins and the Bills. Like, it's hard not to argue that those two teams would be the playoff. And the reason I say that is, like, when you look at the rest of the division, we talked about the AFC North, but I mean, we'll go to the next best division of the AFC West. Outside of the Chiefs, like,
see, I'm still on the Chargers bandwagon of, like, they are, in my opinion, such a better team than their record shows. Like,
but this is the Chargers every year.
I know it. I know it. But, like, for a team that has, like, talent and, like, teams that I think they've had kind of just a bad break of their schedule of, like, who they've played. But they do need to start winning some games, because at the end of the day, I don't care how good you think you are, you got to win games. But, like, I still think, again, based on the rest of the divisions and who we think can make the playoffs, I think the Chargers are in the best opportunity of, like, they have the talent to win enough games to get them into the playoffs.
Well, the good news for the Chargers is they play the Bears next, then the Jets, and they still have the Broncos twice. So at least 4 wins coming up.
But like they've lost to the Titans, right?
Oh, I
like
know.
you can't lose to the Titans and expect to make the playoffs. Like the other losses, the Dolphins, that's a good team. The Cowboys, again, we like to hate on the Cowboys, but it's still a good team. And then they lose to the Chiefs. Like those are all good teams that, yeah, you would like to have one win in there, but like you can understand why they've lost. But that's what I'm saying. Like they're a better team than their record shows, and I think as they go through the season, they've got a lot of opportunities to boost some wins.
Well, outside of the loss yesterday to Kansas City, everything's been one score. Like they've been right there. They, like you said, they probably should have won at least two,
one of them. Yeah,
2 to 3 of those games of the one score. But you just sort of sit back and you look at them. The good news is that, I mean, Josh McDaniels is the worst coach in all of pro football with the Raiders. Like, which is scary to say when Sean Payton and the Broncos look terrible. Now, luckily, they played Jordan Love, who somehow looks like Uncle Rico throwing a football. But you look at that whole division, and outside of the Chiefs, like, it's great to be Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce because you don't have any competition in that division.
Yeah,
like
they're just too easy for them.
Yeah, like even yesterday, it's sort of funny that we talk about it. Like, the Chiefs don't have a star wide receiver like they have Kelce.
No, yeah,
and yet still somehow every single drive you're like, and Kelsey's catching another one. You're like,
guard that guy. Like what? Who else are you even looking at on defense? Like, and it's not like he's making contested catches or like some guy on his hip or something
Wide
like
open.
that. He's wide open in the middle of the field. Like, stop running zone around that dude because you're gonna let him get open. Like,
I just don't understand.
Put somebody
it.
on him.
Yeah. And now, even I will say Travis Kelce, we sort of had this debate at the beginning of the year, and I'm getting more and more inclined to say, yeah, he is. It's probably the greatest tight end that's ever played football, up until this point. Because from an offensive perspective, everyone knows he is the weapon, can't be stopped.
You want to know an even crazier stat? Who is the only other tight end that's in that conversation?
Gronk.
They're the same age. Look it up. That'll blow your mind.
I did. Yeah.
They're the same age.
I feel like Gronk is like 10 years older because I feel like Gronk just got
he's
beat up.
Playing for so long.
My goodness. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
fun fact of the day.
Hats off to Travis Kelce because he still looks like he's 5 years younger than Gronk playing right now. And hats off. I don't know if I brought this up on the solo with us. Like, I heard about it and I was like, you know what? Hats off to him. Kelce, they were like, hey, you're not even like the top paid tight end. What's going on? And he's like, what? I like winning. Like, I'll take a little bit. I'm not getting paid the max that I could. Now it's really working out for him. Like, this is almost like God being like, hey, you took, the football god's looking out for you. We'll let you marry this billionaire singer.
Yeah.
And
she'll cover you.
She'll cover you for the rest of the time. But like, hats off to him. Like, I sit back and look at that and it's like the Chiefs are sort of what the Patriots were doing. Like, they have guys that are superstars. They're like, I'm willing to take a little bit less money in order to win championships, and it's working out great for them. Like, you can't argue the Chiefs I'd argue right now out of the AFC, no one's contesting the Chiefs.
No.
Like, it's the Chiefs division to win.
Oh yeah.
Who would you put against them? Like, out of the AFC, like, who do you think gives them the most matchup problem?
Possibly the Dolphins. Maybe the Ravens. That's it. Like, if the Bills' defense was completely healthy, you could see a good game there. But like that's it. Like, there's not a lot, right? And I only say that with, like, if I'm trying to create some scenario in my head, it's like the Chiefs have kind of a pseudo bad offensive game, which they haven't been like that amazing, like, clear cut offensive side of the ball. But their defense has improved significantly this year. And I think that's kind of the difference maker, where even though their offense isn't as good as they have been, their defense is playing so much better that they're just in control 100% of the time.
It hasn't been a liability.
Oh, yeah.
As it has been for them in the past. It's The Dolphins are a great pick just because of Tyreek Hill and the level that they can sustain. I think they played probably the best team in the NFC in terms of defense. Like, I know that's bold to say when you're looking at San Francisco. I still think the Eagles are probably the best in the country at just playing defense. The Dolphins have a great chance. The biggest issue, I think, for most teams is going to be going to Arrowhead. Like, if you can change that, if you can make it so that you can get home field advantage and Mahomes has to go through you, it changes the game. Like, now,
You say that, and their only one loss was against the Lions at Arrowhead.
you're not wrong. I'm saying more like when I think about the last few playoffs, it's like they play the Bills, they play the Bengals twice.
You're
like,
right. You're right.
Now, the Bengals did what no one thought they could do, which was go into Arrowhead. And it's not that they're unbeatable. We were talking about it yesterday, like Vegas, a home team is getting 3 points. Like, that's how Vegas views it. So if, the Chiefs are playing the Raiders at home and somehow it's Chiefs -1, they're really saying the Raiders are going to win by 2. Like, they're just giving 3 to the home field. But the Chiefs are just they have great fans. Arrowhead, I've never been. I've always wanted to go. I know me and one of our mutual buddies, we've said in a few years we're going to go watch a game at Arrowhead because I know it's loud. Like, you hear from everyone just says those people are maniacs.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Which I will say, you drive through Kansas once, and like, there ain't nothing else here, so you might as well go cheer for the Chiefs. So it's just truth. But the only other team division left in the AFC is the AFC South, which we talked about, and we'll get to it now with the Trevor Lawrence mid.
So I say he's mid in, like, I'm not taking anything away from Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. However, when he gets talked about in the same conversations as, like, Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, like, he's like this generational talent, which, again, it sounds like I'm dogging on it. It's not the truth. Like, Trevor Lawrence is not a prolific passer. Can he make the passes that he needs to get his team down the field and win games? Absolutely. Like, he's a good quarterback. Like, by any means, and we've had this conversation of, like, if they find themselves with the number 1 pick, do they pass on Caleb Williams? Yeah. Like, the Jags by no means are looking for another quarterback. Like, they're fine. They've got their guy. So I'm not saying, like, they need to get rid of him. But, like, I think people think Trevor Lawrence is this prolific, amazing, generational arm type talent. And, like, hate to break it to you, he's not. Like, he's not. A lot of their success, I think, has come from the coach, right? And he's got weapons around him. And yeah, he has a great year with Christian Kirk, but, like, and again, I'm kind of taking it from, like, the fantasy standpoint of, like, he's got other weapons around him. But if in a fantasy standpoint, like, he would be able to spread the ball around to all of those guys if he was that level of talent, and it's not happening. And that's where I kind of realize of, like, you're just not going to get that with Trevor Lawrence. And it's fine. Like, again, we were trying to make, like, older comparisons of, like, guys who clearly good quarterbacks, and nobody said they were a bad quarterback, but, like, weren't prolific passers. And, like, we came up with a couple, like, maybe Joe Flacco or, like, Tony Romo, like, guys that, again, you're not going to take anything away from them and say they're a bad quarterback, like, in their prime. But, like, if you expect them to go out and throw for 300 yards a game, like, sorry, dude, not happening. Like, it's not happening.
I still think the best comparison that we came, because we were just sort of talking, it's easier to look in the past because it's already settled. Like, you got Favre, you got Manning, you've got Brady, like,
yeah, like
Breeze,
prolific passers, the guys that, like, easily are averaging 250 plus yards a game, and you're not batting an eye at it, like, because that's just the way they play. Trevor Lawrence is not that guy.
Yeah, and when the name that I came up with, I was like, do you think this is a good comparison? Which I think it is. It's Carson Palmer.
Yeah, great.
Like,
yeah,
here's a guy that, like, at no point no one's like, hey, you got to get rid of Carson this year. It's like, but at the same time, at no point where you're like, hey, Carson's one of the best to ever do it. Like, and I agree, because when you first said it, and I was like, mid, I was like, I wouldn't trade him, and it was not that type of conversation. It's more just saying, like, he's not this, like, and I think a lot of it comes from, or not even a lot of it, but at least a big piece of it comes from, He's the number 1 overall pick.
Which I get, and again, I'm not even faulting the Jags for taking that because at the time, like he was the number 1 overall pick. You should have picked him, and he's doing fine for you. But like, do you go out and pay him like the Daniel Jones type money? Do you go and pay? No, because again, he's not that. He's in that conversation. Like the media makes him, puts him in like the top tier of quarterbacks, and like. I just don't think he's there from like a straight passing standpoint. He's clearly athletic, does great for the team. You keep that guy. He's just a mid kind of quarterback.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that as time progresses, I think what you'll see from the Jags is there's no way that when he gets to his 4th year that they're not going to give him, some type of ridiculous deal.
Yeah, that's just because that's the way the NFL is nowadays, but yeah.
And what will happen is hey, like, we can't pay these other guys.
Yeah.
You don't have a starting left tackle. He played 1 year of high school football and now he's here. So good luck.
Yeah. Or ETN goes away and now they're stuck with Tank Bigsby. Like, we'll see. Only time will tell, but that's just it's not even really a prediction. It's my observation of like, he is not the prolific passer that everybody's making him out to be.
What's exactly what happened I would argue that right now, the only guy that is truly elite is Mahomes. And this is why I say this. And I always go back to this. When you look at Brady, who he won Super Bowls with, like wide receiver wise, it's really nobody. Like, don't get me wrong, Edelman, tremendous wide receiver. But at no point are you like, Edelman's one of the greatest wide receivers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the year he had Randy Moss in his prime, they went undefeated. They just happened to run into the Giants. Run into the Giants. From that standpoint, like you look at what the Chiefs are doing this year, like all their outside of Kelsey, they don't have a wide receiver. Like it's guys that you do not know who they are, except for the fact that they play for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Like if you gave Mahomes the weapons that some of these other guys
have. That's why I
have,
picked Kadarius Toney as my dark horse.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But then, like,
wrong.
I know one of the guys that's thrown into this elite category right now, and I'm really interested to see what happens now that he's gotten paid, but they're going to start losing wide receiver talent. It's Joe Burrow. It's like they're probably going to pay Jamar Chase, and that's it. And so now it's going to be they're going to look at Burrow to be the answer. Hey, Mahomes makes it work with guys that you don't even, sort of like Rodgers did for years in Green Bay with guys that you just had to Wikipedia who they were, and even Wikipedia was like, yeah, I don't know who this guy is. Like
the other one I would kind of throw into the mix of like who I think has the talent is Justin Herbert. Like
Herbert has a cannon.
His level of, his attributes and like what he can do, I would put into that, right below Mahomes. He the defense of the Chargers and the fact that he's on the Chargers is kind of his downfall. But I mean, like Keenan Allen, don't get me wrong, Keenan Allen's always been a top tier receiver, but like the year that they're having is, I mean, that's like Cooper Kupp, Matt Stafford level type production, and it's just fantastic. And again, I think that just is a testament to how good Justin Herbert is.
If you put Sean McVay on the Chargers are probably the favorite in the division. And I know that's crazy saying with the Chiefs in there. Like, I think with a better coach,
they still got to get a defense.
You're correct, but they miss on so much because I feel like the offensive coordinator limits Herbert, like in their ability, which is sad, but that's just sort of where they're at in there. And then you take a look at the other three teams in the AFC South with the Texans, Colts, Titans. There's been a lot of rumors this week. I'm really interested to see, does it come to fruition? If there's a year that it happens, it's this year that they trade Derrick Henry. Like,
oh yeah, I've been hearing that.
Me personally, I would love just because this team's. If I had to pick a team that I'm like, that's where he's going to go, because I think it fits. It's all their MO. Who would be? What's the team you think I'm going to say? If you had to guess,
you're talking about like running the ball.
Just like this is the team that'd be willing to take a chance to be like, we're going to win it all.
The Ravens?
I think it's the Eagles.
Oof.
Like, I know that sounds nuts, but I think that the Eagles could easily give up like a second or third round pick and be fine. The Eagles are going to be fine. Like,
I don't know. I feel like the Eagles never has run that kind of offense. Like, think about in the past, like when they got DeMarco Murray from the Cowboys, like you could make similar comparisons. Now Henry's, I think, bigger, but like as far as running style, I think that's pretty. That the Eagles just don't run that kind of offense, and like you get someone like DeMarco Murray in there, and they're no good. Like they need a quicker left to right kind of guy, and the where the Eagles are so good is that they can spread the ball around to everybody. And this could just be biased because like all we've ever seen is like Derrick Henry on the Titans. That's only been their one offensive weapon. Is like I feel like Derrick Henry needs a team that's going to be like run first and primarily through Henry to get him going, to like make him effective.
I would just love to see him on a team that the team can't load the box.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with like the Ravens, because Lamar has improved significantly as a passer, and now that they've got Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews as kind of downfield threats. Can you imagine trying to stop like an option play with Lamar possibly handing to Derrick Henry, or then pulling it, and then even if he does pull it, now has maybe like a dump off down the field? Like I don't know.
The Ravens is actually really. That is a great. I think that. The Titans clearly, I think that they're realizing more and more this year that it's like it's over. Like whatever they had going the year that they ended up getting beat by the Bengals in the playoffs, being the number 1 seed, like that's over.
You know who really should go get him though is the Bears, because I mean, like think about like if you try to like you got to load the box, right? Because that takes off so much pressure from Justin Fields of like he doesn't have to be the quarterback and the running back kind of thing. Like go get Derrick Henry. Now they need some offensive linemen to block, but like at the end of the day, like getting Derrick Henry or just the threat of having Derrick Henry there maybe gives up enough of enough room or spaces that Justin Fields then can produce as a quarterback.
I don't hate it. I would hope that he doesn't go to the Bears, because I always want to see guys that have done well for their teams and never won a Super Bowl. Sort of like Fitz, like with the Cardinals. Like you look back at the career that he had and you're like, man, I wish he could have gotten one.
Edge.
Like,
who are you talking about?
Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh, Fitzgerald. Sorry, I thought you were. I was coming with Edgerrin James, but I mean, because you talk about Cardinals.
Was he not on the Colts Super Bowl?
No, that was. Remember, they gave him a ring because of how much he meant to the organization, but they traded him right before the year they won.
That was right, because it was Joseph Adai.
Yeah.
That's
when you said to the Cardinals, like, yeah, that's like, and everybody loved Edge, dude. Like, he was so good.
That like hurts my heart a little bit.
Yeah.
At least they gave him a ring. That was back when they weren't trying to save Killer Wells.
Think about like how far they've gone. Jim Irsay gives a ring to a guy that's not even on his team, and then he's got a guy now who he's like, I don't want to pay you. I'd rather save whales.
Yeah. Which now the Colts, I hated the uniforms yesterday. They just, you summed it up perfectly.
It looks like Duke.
Yeah. They just, it wasn't a good look, which I think that the way that teams make a better look is at least change the emblem. Like just changing colors isn't there for most teams. Like
unless it's the Bengals.
Yeah, unless it's the Bengals.
Or the Browns. You go completely against your entire color scheme, go all white. Yeah. Nailed it.
I will say, the one color scheme I'd love to see, I know this is just a side note. Did you see FIU's like Miami Vice uniform?
Yes, dude.
If Miami did that
like hot pink and black.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, like I would love to see the Dolphins rock that for me, especially Tyreek Hill just running in Miami Vice like colors. Like sign me up. Like I would, I'd put a jersey up of Tyreek Hill if they pull out those jerseys.
They change all the lights in the stadium to neon.
It just looks like little lines.
Yeah, it's a Tron game.
Yeah. Still, Tyreek Hill's running too fast for the cameras to keep up. Like, I would pay for that. But the Colts, now that Anthony Richardson's done for the year with the surgery, Minshew's not bad. Like, he's actually played pretty well considering the fact that it's like offense wasn't designed for him, which I think really speaks to that's the offensive coordinator that came out of Philly. So,
oh really?
Yeah, and it shows that it's like, here's a guy that knows what he's doing.
They have a little bit of a connection there.
Yep, and so it's working. But you look at the division. I really think that if they can figure out how to keep winning, the Texans win the division. And I know that's a lot to put on them, but the Jags don't look great. The Texans have shown, like, when they play really well, they show they're a good football team.
I think they're close. I don't think they're there yet. And I would have made the argument that the fact that the Texans are in second just goes to show like how bad that division really is. But again, I agree with you. Like the Texans are close. I don't think it happens this year. I think they're going to need probably like 2 or 3 years of good draft and or trades to get them to that level. But I don't think anyone other than the Jags is coming out of that division.
Speaking of only one team coming out of the division, the last division we're talking about, the NFC North. So it's maybe only one team for sure. Well, you're for sure going to get one. We'll see who it is. Like I would have said, the Lions look great, and I get it's 1 week. I've never seen a team that went on to win a Super Bowl in my recent memory ever get just shellacked like they did yesterday. Like I think it probably brought a lot of Lions fans back to earth and was like, hey, like, I don't know if this is our year.
Right.
Like,
I mean, maybe again, we talked about last time with the college episode. Maybe that's what they needed though. Like maybe that's because I mean you best believe like Dan Campbell is lighting dudes up after that.
Oh,
like,
I would hate
film room today is
if they could have put that in
hell on earth.
Yeah, a camera in the locker room. I can't imagine what he's told those guys.
I'm not saying they win the Super Bowl, but I think there's no doubt in my mind that they make it simply for the fact that they get to play the Vikings.
Make the playoffs.
The fact that they get to play the Vikings, Bears, and Packers, again. You know what I mean? Like that's like 3 free wins for them, essentially. Like it needs to be. It should be. Right? But like, yeah. And the Ravens are a good team, right? I mean, like, they shouldn't have been blown out the way they were, right? That's hard to get over. But like the Ravens are a good team and they're number 1 in their division. So like it's understandable. But again, when you're talking about like someone's got to come out of that division, I know it's not the Bears and I'm pretty sure it's not the Packers. Like if the Vikings can somehow turn it around, right? Like with Justin Jefferson out though right now, like it's a struggle. Like they're not going to be winning a ton of games that are going to be competing against the Lions.
I mean, the Vikings, you look at it's a tough matchup because it's San Francisco, but then they got Green Bay, Atlanta, New Orleans, Denver, Chicago. Look at the rest of their schedule outside of the last two of the 3 weeks at the very end. They got Detroit and Green Bay. I mean, I would argue that the Bears should be, or the Vikings should be favorites in almost every single game going forward outside of tonight versus San Francisco, like in the Detroit games. Now, who knows what the season looks like going into late December.
I mean, they could. Again, I'm just looking at like who else is in that division. Like they're going to lose to the Lions probably twice, right? So like Lions are going to be number 1, and then again they're trying to win enough games to overtake like the Seahawks or the Rams. I don't know.
Now, we didn't talk about this before we started this episode. We talked about doing our biggest regrets. I'll give you this one and just put you on the spot. Now that we're sitting here probably like a third of the way through the season, is there anything that you would like to predict that you would say this would probably be something that I don't think people would see coming that would be your bigger prediction going forward, knowing what you know now?
As far as like who wins certain divisions or
just what's your Super Bowl matchup? We'll just go with that.
I had the Niners and the Bengals, I think. And
so you're for sure taking the Bengals out.
Yeah, the Bengals are out. I mean, I think you have to give it to the Chiefs as far as, it's boring to say, but I think it's there. Personally, I think the Niners are still in there. Like again, I think that NFC matchup between like the Eagles and the Niners is going to be fantastic. But I think the Niners are the most complete looking team right now, especially if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy. I mean, like that guy is it's incredible, and they have so many other weapons around him. Like I think the Eagles have kind of shown that they're beatable. Where even though the 49ers lost to the Browns, let's be honest, they should have won, right? Like they had that last second field goal and that would have won them the game. I think when it comes down to it, like in the playoffs, like that goes in and they're advancing, you know what I mean? So,
would you put San Francisco on top?
Yeah.
So you have them beating the Chiefs right now.
Oh, you're saying in the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Who would you give it to?
Yeah, I mean, I could do that. I could see it going either way. Again, it would depend on kind of the situation at the time. But like, yeah, right now, I would say Niners versus Chiefs, and then the Niners take it.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that. It's not really a prediction, but the only thing I will say with the inconsistencies is I think it really does open the door. Now we'll see how teams are playing later on in the season, but if it sort of keeps hemorrhaging the way that it is right now, like it totally opens the door for someone like the Ravens to go play the Chiefs and beat them in Arrowhead.
Yeah.
Like it just
Totally possible.
Teams haven't shown that level of dominance this year that I think it opens the door that even for a team like the Lions, not saying they could get all the way, but they could easily go play Philly and Philly just not look good, but the Lions show up, and it's like that's the type of breaks those teams need. That you just need that A+ team to just not play an A game, which it's shown that it can happen this year.
I mean, like the Giants that one year, I think they were the number 6 seed. They won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The Bucks were the number 6 seed with Brady, I think, came and won the Super Bowl. I mean, like, it's totally possible. Like, all you got to do is just make it.
If you can, if you can just get in and keep it rolling, which, I mean, Brady, it's tough to argue with him. Eli, though, probably another Trevor Lawrence substitution of who represents him, except Eli's got 2 rings. I loved Eli just from the time that he was in. But if I had to give a prediction of what I think happens this year, the biggest one is that the Eagles go out the first team they play.
Really?
In the playoffs.
Wow.
And it's just because I don't like throughout the year this year, I just have not liked the Eagles on offense. Like they're not at no point this year have you been like, that's a consistent team on offense.
Yeah, they haven't been really like clicking that well.
If they were to go in the playoffs right now and play someone like
they could lose to the Rams.
100%. 100% lose to the Rams. Like it's just a team that goes out like would their defense play well? Yes, but it's like the inconsistencies on offense. Like if I had to predict a major upset, that would be it right now. Is the Eagles get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs just because they're not playing well. But we'll see if that stays true. Sort of, we'll update our projections.
I'll give you one, and this is more like of a future one, but based on kind of how it's going, and unless something dramatically changes next year, this will be like a next year prediction. I could see the Bears moving on from Justin Fields.
If they hold the number 1 pick, I don't think they have an option. Like, well, I guess we can go into that right now.
Unless Caleb Williams wants ownership.
Oh, what an idiot. I could not believe. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Caleb Williams came out and was like, whatever team I get drafted by, I want to own a piece of them. Which I was like, even Mahomes doesn't own the Chiefs. Like, I don't know if you know how rich old white guys work, but they don't do that.
I don't think he understands the system.
Which we both blame solely on NIL. Like, it's just pump kids' heads full of these dreams. It's like, yo, I don't know what these agents are telling you, but
and he lives in SoCal, right? I mean, like, SoCal is, you know, he's already thinking like Hollywood and he's a superstar and all that stuff, which he is, but like, it's a different level of like, you're going to own part of your football team.
We have a good buddy who's a Bears fan, and it's been brought up because of how bad Caleb Williams has looked the last 2 weeks into this. I would say that there's probably more pause now than there's ever been if you're a Bears like fan and you're holding the number 1 and number 2 pick of like, do I take him? I still think the answer is yes, because I think from a throwing perspective, he's better than Fields in all those categories.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing Fields beats him out on is, you know, running and just pure athleticism. But especially if they own the 1st and 2nd pick of the draft, the ability to pair him, DJ Moore, and Marvin Harrison Jr. up on offense, like immediately the Bears go from being like, hey, like we don't know how they are, to being like, they're going to be a problem for some teams. Like,
you're not wrong, and I hope if they did do that, just because I'm a big Caleb Williams fan, that they then go throughout the rest of the draft and get some linemen to protect him. Because again,
and I say free agency, like you go sign like if you get the number 1 pick in the draft and you know you're going to take those guys, then you go out and you get the best that money can buy, because they got $110 million in the cap next year that they can spend. Go spend it.
I mean, because as good as Caleb Williams is, why has he looked so poor these last 2 weeks? He's running for his life. I mean, the offensive line's not blocking anybody. And, like, let's be honest, it's just going to get tougher if you go to the Bears and got to do the exact same thing, right? Like, that's why Justin Fields has been so bad, on top of all the other things. But, like, if he's running for his life in college and not producing, he's going to run for his life in the NFL and not produce even more, even though he's got those weapons. So I could totally see that, and I would, like to see that. But they would need to then also supplement that line to get him some protection, and I think that would be dangerous.
It's
Derrick Henry, Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, and Marvin Harrison Jr. That's a squad.
Yeah, if they just the other thing with the Bears, I feel bad saying this. Their coaching has been such a I look back at the fact that they fired Lovie Smith when Lovie Smith was winning, and it's like ever since then they've just sort of been like they draft a quarterback, they hire a coach who doesn't like that quarterback, they fire the coach who gets another quarterback who does. And it's just a circle of like they can't pair up the guys that they want.
One good year with Matt Nagy and Trubisky because they were real gimmicky, and it was like, oh man, what's happening? And Trubisky was just athletic enough to make the stuff work, and then the instant they got figured out, garbage.
I mean, if they don't double doink it off the goalpost, like you really sit back and the Bears, Khalil Mack, that defense was just lights out that year. You sort of wonder, like, well, what happens if they had just gotten by the Eagles? Like, how does that team play? It's sort of the question for a lot of teams this year of, like, what if they can just string some things together? I mean, I look at it, the only thing that I can see going wrong for Caleb Williams, where I see him sitting in going back to USC next year, is if the Bears keep winning and the Panthers win enough that their pick that's owned by the Bears doesn't translate to number one and like the Cardinals get it. Because outside of, I look around, it's like, I think the teams that are probably competing for Caleb Williams, I would argue it's the Cardinals, Bears, and the Broncos. Like,
the Broncos would, I think, easily move on. They're fed up with Russ.
Oh, yeah. They just have to be willing to eat that money.
Yeah.
It's yet again, like, I know we've harped on it a bunch, but man, like, it just turns out to be so true. Like, when you pay a guy so much money, you need to be for sure that this is the guy that's going to win you games. Like,
but sometimes it's not even about that. And we've talked about this, like with Travis Kelce, of like, when you pay one guy that much money, you lose things elsewhere. And like, that's part of the problem. Like, not only is that guy probably not that good enough for that money, but now you're reducing the talent around him. And whether you like it or not, like, football is an 11-man game. Like, you need, and in some cases, 22-man game. You know what I mean? Like, you need
all those pieces.
All the pieces.
As I drop my notebook.
Yeah.
It's probably the sign of wrapping it up. It's true. I'll be interested to see as the season goes on, sort of how our predictions continue to look, and sort of that's the great thing about the NFL is every single week it shapes up a little bit more, where you start to just sort of refine things.
We did these power rankings where we are going to do an episode on like the power rankings, and that was probably like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And if I look at those power rankings now, they're probably completely
I'm going to look at it and
all
be
over the place.
Who's doing drugs?
Yeah.
Because clearly I was when I laid out. I think I had Miami number 1 at the time because they just laid 70 points on the Broncos, and now I'm like, they're top 10.
But it's easy, right? Like, you don't do power rankings on like standing rankings. It's a power ranking, like, and it's easy to be biased, by recency. When you see a team put up 70 points in the NFL, you're like, man, they're good.
And then they don't. So we'll see. But any final thoughts?
That's it.
Before we wrap it up. Thanks for tuning in. We'll check in as soon as we can. Back with you soon. Time to pull chalks. See you next time.